Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Education Appropriations hearing this morning. And I know it's early for a lot of y'all. Thank you for taking the time and getting through traffic and coming here. And I appreciate my committee being here this morning, and Sarah, our staff. So I think most of you, I think, have signed up list, and so would love to hear from y'all. I'm going to ask Chairman Randy Nix to open us in a prayer.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the blessings you give to us. Lord, help us to be humble as we serve others. Lord, help us to look to you for the wisdom, justice, and moderation that we need to conduct the business of the state of Georgia. Bless these people that are here today as they make their presentations. Lord, just help us to make the decisions that would honor you. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you, Chairman Nix. So I just want to sort of set the tone this morning. Love to hear from everybody. Our House Appropriations Committee, and as well as Chairman England, we're all working very, very hard every day on this 2020 budget, and that's what I wanted to hear from today. We've passed the 2019 supplemental over to the Senate, so that's kind of our hands. And so the 2020 is what we're working on from the governor's recommendation. And I have my copy right here, and I'm sure y'all have seen things. So we're just trying to interpret a little bit of what the governor's recommendation is, work on it from the House side with a limited amount of funds we have. And so it's a great process we have here between the House and Senate. And so that's kind of where we are, and kind of working off the governor's calculation of $3,000 pay raise for teachers is what we're trying to get to a good place where everybody understands. So we're all in a mode of trying to work the figures and get to a happy medium. So with that said, we'll start off here this morning. First on our list is Yolanda Bell from Georgia Association for CTAE Teachers. If you could come up, and if you want to sit or go to the podium, either one that's you're more comfortable with. Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here this morning.
Good morning. My name is Yolanda Bell. I'm the Executive Director of Career Technical Education for Fulton County Schools, and I'm also the President-elect of the Georgia Association of Career Technical Education. Thank you for having me today on this bright and sunny, beautiful weather day. I just wanted to thank you for allowing me this brief time to express my appreciation of your continued support of education and of CTAE. We really appreciate you fully funding QBE and supporting teacher raises for FY20. So I'm here today to ask the committee to consider increasing the bond funding for statewide CTAE vocational equipment. The current proposal is for $5 million. However, the local school systems have requested $14.4 million. And these are for labs for high-demand, high-wage jobs, including but not limited to statewide 14 construction labs, 19 audio-video technology and film labs, 27 healthcare science labs, 18 information technology labs, and 18 STEM labs. These labs are real simulation labs that students participate in that lead to authentic, rigorous, real, and relevant learning. When we build these labs, students have a sense of ownership of their learning that carries through their participation in our career technical student organizations like TSA and First Robotics. And also it carries through their internships and apprenticeships. Again, thank you for allowing me to speak today to request an increase in the bond funding to support CTAE programs and vocational labs.
Thank you very much. Very important program for me, I really love the great work CTA programs do all across the state, and very supportive of it. Does any of my committee got any questions? Could you tell us for my committee how this bond funding is spent when it gets put down to y'all? Each school gets an amount and then goes out and bids and gets the equipment and the labs. Is that how it works?
Yes, we go through our district procurement processes. The DOE has designated a certain dollar amount depending on what type of lab you're going to build. So.
Okay, and then your school system goes about procuring
Yes.
procuring that lab.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. You do have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Todd.
Thank you.
Representative Jones.
Thank you so much for everything you do. I think without a doubt, I think we can say it's a success. Real quick question.
Mm-hmm.
With all of that request, how do we handle the children that can't get there physically? Do any of these components happen in a virtual world?
Yes, we teach. So, for example, in our school district, we teach healthcare online, our Introduction to Healthcare Science course. We also let some of the middle schoolers take that course so that way they can complete pathways earlier. So depending on the school system, a lot of the local school systems have their own virtual programs where students can take the courses there. And then also Georgia Virtual has CTAE courses online too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
Appreciate you being here. And
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all that you do.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on our list is Gail Smith, Georgia School Counselors Association. Ms. Smith, could love to hear from you.
And thank you so much for allowing me to sit. Nervous knees, I don't do well with that. So Representative Dickey and members of the House Appropriations Education Committee, my name is Gail Smith, and I'm one of the advocacy co-chairs for Georgia School Counselor Association. We have a membership of about 1,200 school counselors. We have a handful of school counselors with us today. Several districts were on break, and so they were able to join us to learn about this process, and of course they're interested in the outcomes of this committee work. On behalf of all school counselors, we want to thank you for allowing us this opportunity to speak to you today and to hear our recommendations for the education budget. I can only imagine the enormity of the job you have before you, so I truly appreciate this work. GSCA is recommending a change and an addition to the 2020 education budget. Our first recommendation is including school counselors in the teacher pay raise. School counselors focus on the academic, career, and social-emotional development on students every day. Through the delivery of standards-based prevention and intervention, students receive the support they need to attend, achieve, and behave in a manner that prepares them for success in school and across their lifespan. School counselors promote safety and intervene when students engage in unhealthy and/or dangerous behaviors. When school counselors provide systematic mental health and safety supports, the school climate and school community are impacted in a positive way. Even though the role of the school counselor is vastly different from that of a teacher, it is similar in that we work together for the common good of our students. One position without the other is not as strong as both working in unison to support our students and their families. For these reasons, we are asking that school counselors receive the same raise as our fellow teachers. In addition, we would like to recommend to the budget is fully funding the school counselor ratios that were signed into law in 2013. In the 2013 Title 20 Cleanup Act, a 3-year plan was set forth to lower the ratios to 1 to 450. That's one counselor to 450 students. And the other part of this plan was to phase in funding for special ed, gifted ed, remedial ed, and ESOL segments. The funding for these segments is important because without the funding, the school counselor ratios are often inflated to unreasonable numbers. Partial funding was allocated for fiscal year 2018 when Governor Deal added approximately $4.1 million to fund the ESOL and remedial ed segments. The special ed and gifted ed segments remain unfunded, and school counselors who work in schools with high numbers of special ed and gifted ed students find caseloads that are often very difficult to manage. Please rest assured that all school counselors are working with their students, regardless of the FTE funding. That doesn't make a difference. However, if we fully fund the special ed and gifted education segments, we would add approximately 270 school counselors statewide. In many areas of the state, an additional school counselor can make a world of difference to students they're serving. The need is great, and we ask that you consider fully funding the remaining segments as was outlined in 2013. Thank you for your time and for your consideration and your support of school counselors, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you should have them.
Thank you very much. School counselors are very, very important, and I certainly hear a lot of comments about the need and importance of them. And I know that ratio is high, and so we're certainly working on that. And so we do have a question here. And before I go any further, I want to introduce my committee to the rest of the thing. I'm sorry I didn't do that to start. We've got Representative Valencia Stovall just walked in. My Office of Planning and Budget, Sarah Roro here to that helps me immensely and with the figures and budget. We got Representative Todd Jones, Chairman Wes Cantrell, Chairman Randy Nix, and Chairman Kevin Tanner. So those is our committee this morning. We got a couple missing who are under the weather, but thank all y'all for being here. Who's 23?
It's me.
Wes, Chairman Cantrell, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for coming down this morning. I don't think you're going to find anybody up here that doesn't recognize how critical school counselors are. Do you know what the funding number would be to fully fund that ratio? How much money we would need to add?
I do not. I tried to calculate that on my own, and those formulas are very complex. In 2013, somebody had that number. It was over the 3 years, it was going to be a $21 million investment in 2013. So I'm not sure now what that number would be.
So are we closer than we were in 2013 or further away?
We are closer because of the 4 subgroups that were unfunded, we've funded 2 of them. But the largest subgroup or FTE category is special ed.
Okay.
And that remains unfunded.
We can find that answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman Tanner.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate what you do. As a father of 4 girls, 3 of which are still in school, 2 in high school, I know the importance of a counselor's. How long have you been in this role, providing that service in schools?
I just retired in May after 38 years in public education. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I spent 30 of those years as a school counselor, 18 as a school counselor, and 12 as a school counselor supervisor in Cobb County. I've been in this position on and off for GSCA for 12 years or so.
It's kind of what I expected, a lot of experience.
Yes.
Tough question for you. We have so many difficult decisions that have to be made under tight budget constraints. Mm-hmm. Based on all of your experience working in education, what is your personal thoughts on the priorities? If you're looking at the teacher raises versus the increasing the counselors, how would you prioritize that? Because So that's what we're faced with many
Understand.
times. So just based on 38 years of experience, I'm just curious what your thoughts are. I'm speechless a lot of times when I'm asked that question too.
Well, I have a group of school counselors sitting behind me, and this answer better be the right answer. I think in the immediate, I'm honestly going to say that equity in the pay raise is really on all of our minds right now.
Okay.
And the fact that teachers, other certificated educators have not received substantial pay raises in quite a few years, I think would have an immediate difference in morale and in the number of just the folks who stay with us, the counselors. It would decrease the turnover rate drastically, I think, with that compensation. But a close second would be the full funding, because then they have to work with these students every day. And even at 450 ratio, that's still a pretty high ratio when ASCA recommends a ratio of 1 to 250. So I would say a close second. Let's keep that on the front burner and continue those conversations. We were expecting that funding after the bill was signed in 2013. So I don't want that to go away, but right now I think we really need to look at the pay raise.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
And you did a good job answering that question, by the way. And I agree that we do need to add additional counselors in the schools. So based on, again, your experience, it sounds like what you would say would be the number one priority is, if we have the specific pool of dollars that are available, is to maybe lower the raise down so that we take into account all of the certified professionals in the school and give that raise across the board. And then when the dollars are available in future years, keep the priority of continuing to increase that raise, and also continue to make sure that we fully fund the counselor program.
Yes, sir. I think that's a good plan. And that the equity in making the pay raises the same is, I think, really important, and probably what you're hearing across from a lot of disciplines. Yes.
I think that in any business, when you have the high turnover that you have in the teaching profession, you have to be able to keep those folks you have, the counselors, the teachers you have first, and then add as you move forward. So again, thank you, because it's important to hear from your perspective, because you've done this for so long and have the experience on the ground. So thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Tanner, for laying that out very well.
Yes.
Very well said. And thank you for your answer, too. Whose house district do you live in? You're not planning on running for office, are we? Very good answer.
You'll just wait and see.
Oh, okay. I know, I'm scared of her.
She's a politician already.
Chairman Nix, we have a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. He touched on something I wanted to ask you about. We hear a lot about the turnover rate for teachers. What is the turnover rate for counselors? Is it similar to the turnover rate for teachers? What is our retention need there?
I can't answer that from the state level, but I can answer it from the district where I used to work. And I don't know the percentage, but I do know that in any given year, we would lose as many as 30 school counselors to retirement, job changes, moving with a spouse. I want to stay home with my baby, those kinds of changes, not really because they were tired of school counseling and it was exhausting them, but they were just leaving the field just for reasons that we all would have to leave a job sooner or later. But then, of course, would have to hire that many more school counselors, and what we've learned from that is that there's not a critical shortage of school counselors like we had in the 90s. There are plenty of excellent school counseling programs in Georgia, and they're producing excellent school counselors. So we always were able to fill those jobs with people who were highly trained and qualified. That's just Cobb, 30 a year turnover or so. That's like 10% out of the 300 or so counselors we have in Cobb.
Okay.
But statewide, one little bit of data you might want to know is we collected data statewide about all of the school counselors. 61% of our districts have 10 or fewer school counselors. So that's probably, those are, of course, our smaller districts, probably an elementary school or two, a feeder middle school, then a high school. I would suspect in small districts we're not having turnover. Folks are probably staying put in those jobs.
But that's sort of a local decision, how many counselors those school districts hire. Is that right, though?
What, and I didn't, what was,
How many, the formula sort of gives us money at a ratio, but it's really up to the local districts on how they hire and where they put counselors. Is that
Right.
not right?
That's correct.
So do school systems hire counselors straight out of college, or is it most all of them teachers that have rolled into that role, been that, or how do we
And
hire
And
counselors?
that's a good question. I would say fewer are coming out of the classroom because school counselors, for years, we've not had to have teaching experience. Most of the school counselors we hired in Cobb were right out of their degree programs, but highly skilled and highly trained. We liked for them to have some teaching experience, but that wasn't absolutely necessary.
Let me make another statement. And counselors are so important. They were so important to me when I came through school, not just academic, but I see today we have so many young people that need counseling and into careers. And we're trying to fill these jobs and get these students into a right career path, whether it's academic on to a university or college, or either into jobs. I want to make sure our counselors are trained and know the industry in their area, whether it's construction or manufacturing or whatever type of trade industry needs in that area. I have industry coming to me a lot. We need more trained workers coming out of school, and I just want to make sure those counselors are career counselors as well as academic counselors.
Right. And the Ask a National model, which is a model that a lot of our districts now are ascribing to, we focus on 3 domains of student development: academic, career, and social emotional. Mm-hmm. So our 3 plates that we're carrying are very full. I do want to give kudos to Dawn Mann, who is over at the DOE, the director over school counseling. And of course, at the DOE, we're under CTAE. She and her team are doing a fabulous job at professional learning in the area of career for our school counselors. One thing that we know is happening is that the school counselors really are not aware of the career opportunities in their area or in the state. And Dawn is working to do externships to bring the business and industry to school counseling professional learning. Good. So that we're all becoming aware of what's out there and how we can best advise our kids. Because that track to college isn't always the best route to go for so many of our students.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good.
So
well,
she's.
Thank you. I hope our counselors are
Yes.
more attuned to the needs of industry and business
Yes.
out there, and trying to guide these young people into what's best for them.
We're better off now in that regard than we've been in years, and also keeping in mind that career work begins in kindergarten. So even our elementary counselors are talking to students about career. That the first time we ask a kid, what do you want to do when you grow up, we've started the career conversation.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. We're going to move on. I know our time's short, so thank you very much for being here. I want to make sure we get to everybody. Laura Dilly with Georgia Psychological Association. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for letting me join you. Thank you, committee. My name is Laura Dilley, and I am the president-elect of the Georgia Psychological Association. And I'm both a licensed psychologist and a certified school psychologist in the state of Georgia. And while I do not currently work in the public schools, I worked in the Cobb County schools as a school psychologist for 10 years prior to joining the nonprofit healthcare world. I want to thank you for your efforts in public education and figuring out the best ways to fund and support our students. And I would like to encourage you to ensure that school psychologists and other mental health professionals in the schools receive equitable pay raises. Currently, it's a challenge in the schools to hire school psychologists in Georgia. There is a shortage. This is particularly true in areas outside the metro Atlanta area. School districts are having to think about potentially contracting with providers to provide telehealth services in order to provide needed services for schools. School psychologists are trained to provide comprehensive mental health services to children in schools that both prevent problems as well as intervene when individual students need mental health assistance. Related to preventative work, school psychologists provide leadership in schools related to social emotional learning initiatives that help improve school climate and also decrease problem behaviors. So for example, several of my colleagues are involved in providing classroom lessons to kindergartners on how to ask for help and listen to others. And while these seem like very basic skills, I think they're skills that even as adults, we sometimes struggle to remember how to ask for help and how to listen. And then in addition, when individual students struggle with emotional and behavioral problems, school psychologists are involved in consulting with teachers, with counselors, designing classroom intervention plans, and measuring their success. They're skilled in intervening when students have problems with anxiety, with depression. Several of my colleagues have recently been working with students that have a lot of anxiety and are refusing to go to school because they're scared. And they've been able to work with them to help keep them in school, to get them to school. But in closing, I'd like to note that 1 in 5 children and adolescents have a mental health problem. And of these children, only 20% are receiving the mental health services that they need. And in order to ensure these children in Georgia receive the mental health services they need, I encourage you to provide school psychologists in the pay raise increases and promote equity. But I thank you all very much for all of your work and service that you do for the state of Georgia and its children.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Does the committee have any questions? We have one. Representative Stovall.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. I have a question. There's a comment that you made about the school districts outsourcing or contracting with telehealth. What would the effect be with that? I know it makes a difference when an actual person is there, especially when you talk about with children. Then I guess having a screen and somebody trying to talk them through an episode or something like that. And that's the first question. The second one is, being that there is a shortage on as far as the availability of child psychologists, what would you recommend as far as even with the school districts and the state with how to be able to best handle that situation? And you know, is it instead of trying to recruit more to actually work at, you know, to be at the school, is it looking at the healthcare organizations or companies that have child psychologists and that are in private practice, and maybe being able to outsource it there, but not through the telehealth type of mechanism?
Thank you. Let me take your first question regarding the effect of using more telehealth psychology. I think it is sometimes helpful and necessary. We do need more access to services for children, and in particular, some of the districts that are looking at it that I've talked to are looking at it for completing psychological assessments of children. And I think that it can be a benefit, but I think it's better in person. I do think that, particularly in a school setting, school psychologists that work in schools know the system. They know all of the players. They can talk with the teachers walking down the hallway, and they can provide more ongoing care. So I think that while we want to provide access, and we may need to do some of that through telehealth, I think that it's always best in person. Regarding your second question, remind me again.
It was the shortage of the availability of child psychologists, and your recommendation with the school district and the state on how do you be able to still find the need that's needed there for the children, but taking into account that there is a shortage.
Yeah, I don't think that's a quick and easy fix. I think some of it is continuing to grow our school psychology programs within the state. We have several universities that grow school psychologists, and I think growing our own is one of the best ways that we can increase the numbers. I think also, pay raises do help. We do recruit a lot of students from out of the state. I came from Texas to work in Georgia, and for our new incoming school psychologists, when you're comparing offers across states, I was looking here and in Virginia, those pay differences do make a difference. I guess one other thing I would add is you mentioned something about integrating with the private sector, and I do think that's important, that there are times when schools do need to integrate with the private sector of mental health, and there's not a lot of integration right now between those two systems.
Chairman Nix.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here, and I think through the school safety discussions we've had, the school psychologists are really being elevated in terms of your capabilities there. She touched a little bit on the availability of school psychologists or psychologists in general for children, especially in South Georgia. Can you give me an idea what the difference in pay between a private practice psychologist would be as opposed to a school psychologist who is employed by the school system?
Sure. I can talk some from personal experience because I did make the switch from working in the public schools into it's a nonprofit health organization, but I would say the difference is probably about $15,000 as a psychologist working outside the school system, and that is a large amount. And when there are opportunities outside the schools, you have to consider that. Even though my first love is the schools, I have to think about other things as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to continue to move on. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Next is Don Wessels, School Social Workers Association of Georgia. Don, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. If it's okay, for respect for your time and for my presentation, I have two colleagues who are here, and we can just not repeat each other when we talk to you.
Absolutely.
All right. Ms. Harris.
Just, we got 3 chairs there.
There we go.
Good morning.
Okay. Yeah, just make sure you're speaking into the mic.
Good morning. I am Dr. Ursula Harris, and I am a school social worker with the Gainesville City School System and also our system's homeless liaison.
Good morning. I'm Patrick Hardigan. I'm school social work at Milton High School and Fulton Schools. I've been serving there for 17 years now.
And I'm Don Wessels, and I work with the Cobb County School System, and I've been there for 30 years. And prior to that, for 15 years, I was a probation officer at Juvenile Court in Fulton County.
So thank you so much for allowing us to be here today. First, I want to say thank you for your commitment to making Georgia one of the most sought-after places to live. and for your combined commitment to education and doing what is best for our students, our families, and those who serve them. As the student services personnel who are integral to providing wraparound services for students, school social workers work to remove barriers to student success through crisis support, mental health counseling, behavioral assessments, staff and community training related to cultural, social, economic, and mental health issues. We facilitate school adjustment for students, resource coordination for families to access available services. We address issues of non-attendance and truancy, child abuse and neglect, homelessness, and case management for families requiring multiple resources. And we do this at a ratio of 1 to 1,475 students. Our direct services to students, in collaboration with our school counselors and our school psychologists, ensures that there are students in our classrooms for teachers to teach, that students' mental health needs are identified and addressed so that the safety of all our students are protected. And our work also contributes to our increasing graduation rates. As I like to say, if they're not there, they don't graduate. Our commitment to Georgia students, we want that to be recognized and acknowledged, and that we ask that as discussions continue about pay raises for certified staff, that those discussions include school social workers, counselors, and psychologists. We thank you for all that you're doing. I understand even more so listening this morning as to what a huge amount of work you have before you, and that it's going to take some difficult decisions. But we also want our work to be valued and to understand. And we know that sometimes school social workers, we get, who are they? But we are there. We are there. We're working behind the scenes, and we're working collaboratively with everybody that is working to serve our students and families across the state of Georgia at a very high ratio in times where students' mental health needs are paramount. And we're seeing a lot more issues with students that require our services. So thank you so very much.
Well, thank you for those comments. You are absolutely right. There's lots of needs out there. It seems like a real escalating out there. And I thank the taxpayers of Georgia and and then our efforts here at the state as well as local to try to keep these students in school and provide the services they do need. They seem to be needing many more wraparound services that we hear a lot about. So I know it's a real challenge. We do have a question here from Representative Stovall.
Thank you all for being here so early. The question I have is trying to understand the difference with the psychologist and the social worker's role at the school. Can you give me an example of a scenario where the social worker role was this and the psychologist's role was this? It's kind of, it's getting an understanding of it.
I can start. We didn't quite divvy up the rock, paper, scissors of the questions. I've been working in North Fulton for 17 years now, and I know that within different districts and schools, the professionals do kind of line up with different roles. So I am speaking to Fulton County. So some other counties, especially, I find that the separation of the roles is much more defined when you have social workers. There are several counties, because social work is not funded a one-to-one. The schools get the money, but they don't necessarily use it for social work. So some of the counselors and psychologists will take on duties that we would normally do if we were there. The first thing that I think of is that certainly I make home visits, and my psychologist would not get into their car and make a home visit. We do kind of fall into the jack of all trades. A lot of times we fall into the hands go up and they say, what's next? We're not sure, let's call Patrick, maybe he has an idea. That's a lot of, it tends to be the things are a little bit stickier, a little bit more legal, a little bit more of that, really a first responder to mental health. A lot of our school psychologists do spend time working with kids' mental health, but we don't do any testing. So if they're doing testing, they have requirements and they have deadlines to meet for IEP meetings. So my psychologist does not do mental health. My psychologist does testing for special needs. And I do all of the first responder mental health, along with the child abuse and all the social work things that you think of. So my role has become more mental health and crisis, but depending on where I work. But what's unique about social workers is that the response you get will be different because social workers adapt to whatever their environment is. So I work in a really high socioeconomic area, so mine's almost all mental health, a little bit of need, but mostly emotional, behavioral. My colleagues in different areas do a much different job than I do. Sorry.
Thank you. Representative Jones. Oh, you want to?
If I could just add a comment. You know, we work totally in collaborative with those people behind us right now. We could not work in an isolated manner without counselors and school psychologists because we're part of that team, that student support team. And one of the features that is a little bit different is the social worker, as the textbooks say, is the liaison between home, school, community, and agencies. So we often are out on meeting with people and families for mental health issues. There are many students that we refer for either homicidal or suicidal ideation. I had them both in the last 3 days. And for example, we will help serve as the point person, the advocate for each of those segments that child and family relate to. It could be the juvenile court. We go to juvenile court. We know the judges. We know the public defenders. We know the child advocates. We will normally also, if we're there, we have the major role in linking possible abuse and neglect with Department of Family and Children's Services. And so we would be, as some cases in counselors would do, but if social workers have that role, we again interview the child in a very respectful way. We make a referral if it's important, and we determine the priorities. Is this something that is very severe where this child, by law and state law, should not go home? We follow the guidelines of Family and Children's Services and making those referrals and reporting to agencies. We also accompany children and families to hospitals at times, both mental health hospitals and physical hospitals, because many families, as the same reason that there's so many people going to food pantries and not through Family and Children's Services for stamps, is a lot of folks, it's beyond the capacity of those children and sometimes the adults to access those resources. So that's kind of what we do in a broad range. We're in our car probably a lot more than our colleagues. They may drive further to and from work, but during the day we're probably in the car more, making contact with these different schools and with these different programs for our students.
Thank you. Let's move on. Representative Jones, you got a question?
Thank you, Chairman Dickey. I'm first year on appropriations, so I get to ask all the dumb questions. And everyone goes, he's just first year, so we're just going to let it go.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for everything you do. Like Chairman Tanner, 4 kids through the public school system in Forsyth County. I can't say enough about the system in Forsyth. We're blessed, and we know that. At least I hope many of my constituents know that. Here's the question that I have, and I have a feeling I'm going to get the Bill Clinton, it depends, but for a completely different reason. When I think of Milton, so you said, well, I have a socioeconomic strata that say here, so mine is mental with just a little bit of need. I'm not going to go through other schools, but there's other schools I'm sure that are just the opposite, maybe different socioeconomic strata than Milton or South Forsyth High School, and maybe it's a lot more need. And I'm sure there's everything in between, may it be through the inner city, the rural areas of our state, the suburbs, etc. So a question that I have just from thinking about from appropriations, and I probably should have asked the psychologists, and I should have probably asked everyone else who's supporting us. When I went to school, it was my mom and dad telling me the teacher knows everything, be quiet and sit down in your desk, and if you don't, the principal's going to put one on your backside, and then guidance counselor was just there to tell me which college to go to. I think things have gotten seriously. I think things have gotten a bit more complex.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll just call it that, complex. Yeah, well, my dean asked me at least which color do you want to hold on to while I facilitate the punishment. He meant what color chair. But long story short, you said 1475, and that number caught me because I've heard 450, and we're not necessarily getting to that. Then you said 1475. I think of Milton. I think of South Forsyth High School. I know they're both over 2,000, but still, that's 1.5 FTE, which I don't know how you split an FTE in half. And at the end of the day, is it 1475 across the state, or is it 1470? In other words, if there are certain schools that have higher need, are we placing more resources there and less resources other places, or is it strictly? Oh no, okay, no.
It depends on the county.
It depends on the county.
We're very lucky, and
Yes, they are.
I thought it was 2250.
No, it's,
Fulton County fully funds whatever state money comes in. Fulton County pays, so we're very lucky. We probably have 50 social workers in Fulton County, so we're doing fantastic. I know Gwinnett has half that many and more kids.
With more kids.
So because the money is not tied person to person, the district can use it for other things. So in our case, the money comes in, the social workers get split up based on need. So we do have some social workers that have one school. Most of us have three.
I
So
can
we-
speak to, because I've kind of worked all over the state, and I was in BIB, which now houses the National Superintendent of the Year, which is a urban district, 40,000 students. When I was there, we had 4 social workers. So the range around the state definitely depends on where you are and how they choose to spend those monies, kind of regardless of need.
So quick follow-up, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman?
quick.
Very quick. What I'm hearing you say is the pot of money goes down, whatever that pot is, and then the superintendent and the board and the staff determine how it's going to be laid out. Is that a fair generalization?
Absolutely.
Right. we
Okay.
don't have a what
There
that
is
called?
no-
What is this?
There is no mandate from
There
us
is no
telling
mandate.
you.
Absolutely.
Correct.
The
There's
re-
just a
Okay.
recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you for the shout out to Dr. Curtis Jones.
Yes.
I have part of BIB, Macon BIB, and he is doing a fantastic job down there, and really has turned things around
That's still
there
home, so
with a
yes.
lot of help.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And he does acknowledge the
And,
help of
but,
everybody.
getting National Superintendent of the Year is a big deal. So
Big deal.
thank you, Dr. Jones. All right, thank y'all very much
All
for being
right,
here. I
thank you.
appreciate it. We're going to try to, interest of time, we got a couple more. Ellen Reynolds, Georgia Child Care Association. Thank you for being here as well and your patience this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ellen Reynolds, and I am the Executive Director of the Georgia Child Care Association. I will tell you this is one instance where we're talking about pre-K and supporting raises for pre-K teachers, but this is one instance where the private sector and the public schools are in the exact same position, and I get the benefit of kind of advocating on behalf of both groups because we get the same funding and the same challenges that come along with the funding. And so we definitely did want to be here in support of Governor Kemp's recommendation for the raises, and we're very grateful that he chose to include pre-K as his predecessor, Governor Deal, did, because if you don't include the pre-K teachers, what you get is a big churn out of pre-K the minute a job in the public schools comes open in K through 12. And the number one indicator of success with children in early childhood education is that teacher-child relationship. So turnover really sets back some of the educational outcomes we try to achieve. The one thing I would say is with assistant lead teachers, while I know you're looking at the 3,000, and what I'm hearing, listening to all these needs today, is you all may need to lower that and to help fund some others in the K-12 setting. I would say please keep the 2% for the assistant lead teachers. Right now they make about $15,000 a year for a very demanding job, and so they need every bit of help we can get. If you were to choose to reduce the funding, what we would ask, if you were to lower the raises, including the pre-K teachers, this is going to be funded through lottery funding. And keep in mind there are about 3,800 pre-K classrooms in Georgia in both the public and private sector. So you're talking about 7,600 teachers altogether, half leads, half assistant leads. If you were to reduce that funding, what we would sincerely ask, one of the things that goes to contributing to childcare being so expensive for those who pay 100% out of their pocket is that both pre-K and subsidized childcare are not funded at adequate levels. Pre-K is a loss leader, whether it's in the public school system or whether it's in the private childcare system, it is subsidized to the tune of at least $5,000 on average per classroom, either by local tax dollars that are raised by a public school system to put into that classroom, or by child care providers charging full pay parents to make up those difference. Why would child care providers have this? Because it's like milk at the grocery store. You got to have the loss leader because you want to get the other children around it, and they're in the interest of serving children. This is what their heart and their passion is. So it's those two things. So what I would ask that you do with the difference is add it to administrative cost, because there have been more and more requirements put on. For example, there's been an additional staff person that's been required in the last few years as we capture children's we now capture the children's work so that their kindergarten teacher can look at that file of the children's work over the course of the pre-K year and see how that child has developed and where they are in their educational experience. So we would just ask that, because this is lottery dollars, that you would take that difference and add it to administrative funding that's desperately needed, because classrooms only get $2,000 for supplies every year. That's every crayon, that's every piece of paper, it's every chair and table. It doesn't come near covering the cost. So that would be our request. And again, we're very grateful that pre-K teachers and assistant lead teachers were included in that recommendation. And just if you are, I assume you want to keep parity with the pre-K, they won't be getting a $3,000 raise if teachers are getting a $2,000, in K-12 are getting a $2,000. So please consider shifting those funds to support the administrative costs, because it would help all pre-K classroom settings, public and private schools.
Thank you. Committee understood that, I think. Good suggestion. We'll certainly take that under consideration.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Mr.
for being
Chairman.
here.
Thank you.
Emily Acker with with Hillside. Thank y'all for being here.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning.
Again, my name is Emily Acker. I'm the CEO at Hillside, and this is Dr. Christina Kennedy, who is our Principal of Education at Hillside. Now, we're here wearing other hats as well. We represent two associations of other private providers serving children who need out-of-home care for mental health and behavioral health reasons. Together Georgia is one association with many private members, of which some have residential schools, and also the Georgia Alliance of Therapeutic Services, all of which have private residential schools for these children who are unable, due to safety, their own safety, to remain in their homes and in their public schools. So there's about 20 of us in the state. Again, you've heard from our colleagues how critical mental health is to the children of Georgia. And you heard Laura say 1 in 5 children have a mental health diagnosis. We serve those children who cannot stay safely in their homes and need to come to treatment as well as continue with their education. So a very important role we play in Georgia for children and families. So we're here today to ask your continued support to fund under the non-quality basic education formula grants the increase in funds for residential treatment facilities based on attendance, and to provide funds to adjust the state-based salary schedule to increase salaries for certified teachers and certified employees in residential treatment facilities by $3,000. One thing I would add is, considering the 20 to 21 residential schools, we are not sure that the total amount in that line item of $503,000 will adequately cover all the certified teachers and certified employees in these residential schools. So we are gathering some more information so that we can give you kind of feedback on that total number, but we are appreciative that we're being considered in the raise as well. One other issue, bringing Christina here, we wanted to bring to your attention just one other disparity that continues to kind of plague our teachers in the residential school programs.
So one of the things that we really struggle with is recruiting and retaining really good teachers. It's very, it's very difficult to teach in our setting because we're dealing with mental health illnesses first and then trying to educate the children. And our teachers have to meet all the same requirements. They have to meet all the same certifications. We do all the same state reporting. We're getting all of our funding through the state, and yet our teachers are not allowed to participate in the teacher retirement system. They're not allowed access to the state benefit plans. Most of them are getting less than their district's amount, just as annual pay. So it makes it really, really tough. I know some people have already talked about the turnover. My turnover last year was over 40%, because as soon as a public school position comes open, they're gonna go do that, of course. I mean, and I've been lucky in that we have a very family-friendly environment, and I've had teachers that have left and gone and got invested in TRS and then come back to teach with me. So I just think that at this point, we need to show them that they're appreciated, and they already kind of feel like, well, we're doing all the same things every other teacher in the state of Georgia is doing, and yet we're not allowed to get the benefits that they're getting. So this would be a really important step in letting them know that they're appreciated as well.
Thank you. I do not see any questions, but thank you for your time coming here, and I've heard that issue before, and thank you for bringing it back up. I know you do. So, but we are aware of that, so thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay. We are down to our last sign up. Margaret Ciccarelli with Georgia Association. Page. What did I say? Page. Professionals of
Thank
Georgia
you.
Educators.
Thank
Thank
you,
you. It is
Mr.
early
Chair.
this morning. I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the opportunity. Margaret Ciccarelli, representing Page, over 95,000 educators throughout the state, including school psychologists, school social workers, school counselors, special education specialists, media specialists. About 75,000 of our educators, though, are practicing classroom teachers. Wanted to speak a little bit about the pay raise and to express our gratitude both to this committee and for the governor's office for proposing a $3,000 raise for some educators. We understand that it is a substantial down payment on the $5,000 that was promised during the governor's campaign, and we think it'll go a long way to boosting teacher recruitment across the state, which is, I know, is something that's of concern to all of us. The group of educators who appear to have been left out of the $5,000 or the $3,000 portion of the raise, however, are some of our most critical educators to meeting the student mental health needs. And that has really been discussed at length by practitioners this morning. But to try to link up that with school safety, which is a priority for all of us, as was reflected in the governor's even AFY 19 budget that y'all passed out of here. It's very important that we continue to value those professionals and pay them well to make sure that we're meeting those student mental health needs and therefore making our schools safer and enhancing school climate. Of the educators who are left out, that also includes media specialists and special education specialists. They're critical members of the team as well. We would prefer to see every educator, every certified educator receive that $3,000 raise. If we need to talk about how to do that, my organization stands ready to work with y'all to reach a solution to make sure that everybody's paid fairly. It's important to understand also, as I know the committee staff understands and many in this room do, that this isn't a one-time pay inequity, that it would actually set up dual pay salary schedules for these two groups, which would compound the inequity moving forward, particularly when the remaining part of the promised $5,000 raise is eventually delivered. So that's of concern because it would perpetuate moving forward. So as I explained, we stand ready to work with y'all on solutions and appreciate your attention and commitment to the state budget and to educators in the state.
Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate. Does my committee have any questions? Thank you for those comments and work you do. That is the end of our sign-up sheet. Thank all of y'all for being here and your input. I signed up. Oh, who did I skip? Please come forward. Please do.
I think she had contacted Sheila.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us who you are and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jacqueline Browning, and I actually am here as a private citizen. I don't represent an organization. I am a nationally certified school psychologist, and I serve students in Colquitt County, so I am way down south in Georgia in one of our rural communities. I'm very concerned about the long-term implications of the disparity in the pay raise for educators in Georgia. As of Friday, February 15th, there were 23 school psychology positions posted on teachgeorgia.org. 12 of those positions had been posted for over a year, and we've been unable to fill them. There is a growing crisis in Georgia with a shortage of school psychologists, and this crisis has resulted in an increase in student caseload and work responsibilities for practicing psychologists. The state of Georgia right now funds school psychologists at a rate of 1 to about 2,400 students. The National Association of School Psychologists recommends 1 to 1,000 students. In my community, we have a position that's been open for a year, and right now I'm serving at a rate of 1 psychologist to about 3,500 students. Right now, in order to fill these positions, we've got to make school psychology appealing to teachers who are interested in growing professionally, to young college students who are interested in academic, behavioral intervention, and mental health intervention, to create a separate salary schedule for school psychologists and other certified personnel does not make this position very appealing at all. Right now, school psychologists are often considered support personnel. I would argue that we are not support personnel. We are educators that are part of a larger team that includes counselors and social workers and all of those other certified staff members that have been excluded from the pay raise. Psychologists are qualified psychological examiners. We're experts in academic and mental health intervention. We're experts in behavior management and modification and collaboration with students, teachers, families, and the communities as a whole. It's very important that we fund school psychologists at a comparable rate to other educators in order to make this profession enticing so that we can continue to fill the positions that are available and retain the school psychologists that we currently have in our state. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry I made you be the last one. If I knew you came that far, I'd put you first. So.
No, that's okay. It's a very important issue. It's worth the drive.
Well, thank you for what you do. It is a very, very important position, and I know this committee appreciates all the comments this morning from everybody. It's a great time for us to be hearing this. We're working hard on our budget, along with the governor's office and the Senate as well. So I hope y'all will make the governor's office and the Senate aware of your concerns as well. I think you've done a very effective job this morning for this committee, and we'll certainly take that in consideration. But as I see it, it's quite a process up here, and a good one that we go through to be good stewards of taxpayers' money. And our children's education is very, very important to their welfare and health. So thank y'all for all you do. And do I hear motion to adjourn? Thank y'all very much. We're adjourned.